Today on Madden 24, I'm going to go over some players who you need to trade for in your franchise modes. I think trading has really been fixed this year, and it is a lot more challenging to get certain good young players. So making a list for today's video was a little bit more challenging than I expected, but I did find a nice group of players who are easier to trade for than they should be, who you should be targeting in your franchise modes. Before we get started, I've got a quick word from today's video sponsor, SeatGeek. With football season back in full swing, I'm sure many of you guys, myself included, are going to be looking to get out to some NFL and college games this year, and SeatGeek is the best way to do it. SeatGeek takes the confusion out of buying tickets. You'll notice that all of the available seats are coded on a scale of 1 to 10, with a higher number generally being a better deal, and those are colored in green. You'll also get a look at your view of your seats before you buy your ticket. The best part of all is you'll be able to save some money by using my code Octagonal Gaming, spelled as it is on screen, for $20 off your first order. Thanks again to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video. So for today's list, I ended up choosing 8 players on offense and 7 players on defense who I think you should be looking to trade for in your franchise modes. This video won't necessarily contain super great players because they are really hard to get, and if you want to get those players, be my guest. But there are players who are just a little bit worse than the elite stars of the league who aren't that hard to get. I will say it is really challenging to go out and get good young players this year. Look at Jameson Williams, for example. You're going to have to give up an arm and a leg in order to acquire him, and while it might end up being worth it, there are players who are pretty similarly in value to a guy like Jameson Williams who are a lot easier to get. Now, if you want the cheesy solution, you can always go into settings and turn your trade difficulty onto easy or very easy. But if you're still looking for a challenge, these are some players who you should go out and look to acquire if you keep it on normal mode, or even pick one of the harder trading modes as well. We'll start at the quarterback position. There's one very clear option here, and for me, that is Trey Lance with the 49ers. Brock Purdy is slated here to be their starter and their QB of the future, which really hurts Trey Lance's value. He's only 23 years old, and yes, he's only a 71 overall. He only has normal development, but there is a lot of room for you to grow with him as the potential franchise quarterback in your franchise. He has all the physical tools that you're going to really enjoy playing with: 87 speed, 91 throw power. I'm surprised those are not a little bit higher. And if you put him in the trade finder, all you have to give up is a few day 3 picks, which feels like way too little. I decided to finesse the Niners even more here and trade 3 backups who might not have even made the final roster for Trey Lance, who could be your franchise quarterback. Javonte Williams is the player we're going to go over here at running back. Javonte Williams is a very talented young player, only 23 years old. There's a lot of room to grow. He's already an 82 overall, and he can be your starting running back really for the next 5 or 6 years at least, as long as regression doesn't completely kill him. Compared to some of the other running backs of a similar talent level, I think it is a little bit easier to get him. All it would end up taking would be a few backups and a 5th round pick, and that got the job done. Javonte's Denver Bronco teammate Jerry Jeudy is another good candidate for you at wide receiver as well. I noticed it's really hard to get talented young receivers, but Jerry Jeudy is quite a bit easier than some players who are honestly a little bit worse than him. Judy's got pretty solid attributes across the board. Good route runner, he's 6'1", he's got decent speed, solid enough hands, and really all you have to give up is probably around the value of a 2nd round pick. We can do even less than that though. Dayo Odeyingbo and 2 4th round picks will get the job done for a 24-year-old ultra-talented wide receiver. Juju Smith-Schuster in New England is also a very good option. He is sneaky young. He was drafted at the age of 20, so he's a lot younger than you'd think he is, only being 26 years old. In terms of talent, he's pretty much equal to that of Jerry Jeudy, and it's probably even easier to trade for him. A couple backups and a 3rd round pick will get the job done. If you want to complete your receiving core, I would look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. They obviously have George Pickens, who is a superbly talented young player who is far and away the most valuable receiver long-term on the roster. And because of that, I think the Steelers almost view Deontay Johnson as a little bit more expendable. Now, he is 27 years old. He's not exactly a spring chicken, 3 years younger than Jerry Jeudy, but he does have superstar development, and I think there is still more room for him to grow. Again, solid enough speed, solid enough route running, solid enough hands, and I think it's a little bit easier to trade for him than it really should be. Now, we are giving up Jack Conklin in this deal, who is a solid starter, but that's really about it. And in terms of overall value, I think that's pretty good for a guy like Deontay Johnson. At tight end, the Bills used their first-round pick this year on Dalton Kincaid out of Utah, which again, I think makes Dawson Knox a little bit more expendable. I tried trading for Kincaid, and he's a lot harder to get than Dawson Knox, who is only 3 years younger. He's quite a bit better as an 83 overall. It's like having another wide receiver at the tight end spot with him being a big guy, 6'4", 250, and he's a competent enough blocker. For the small price of Sione Takitaki and a third-round pick, you can get a really good young tight end who's only entering his prime. We've got a couple offensive linemen here, starting with Kevin Dotson with the Steelers. They've got a lot of talent already at left guard, and because of that, Dotson's value is really diminished. He's only 26 years old, he has star development, and he's the 14th ranked left guard in the game. So you're getting an above-average starter ratings-wise right away, and a guy who's likely going to be an above-average starter for around 5 to 6 years. All we had to give up is Blake Freeland, a 69 overall rookie, to get the job done. The other offensive lineman who I think is a good option for you is Cesar Ruiz with the New Orleans Saints. He's only 24 years old, and he as well has a development trait being star. He's a 75 overall, and he's pretty much an average level starting guard in the league, but with him being 24 years old, he's going to continue to progress rather quickly and likely won't be getting worse for another 4 to 5 years. If you put him in the trade finder, these trades really are not that bad. This one is just a bunch of day 3 picks. I would kind of be opposed to trading 6 day 3 picks, but if you think about it, none of those picks really have impressive value. So I think that could be a fair trade if you don't care about your day 3 selections. The New York Jets have a loaded edge rushing room with John Franklin Myers and Carl Lawson as the starters. They've used first-round picks on Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson, and because of that, I think Bryce Huff is very expendable to them. Bryce Huff is usually listed on the trade block in this game, so you really don't have to give up anything for him. He's a talented 25-year-old pass rusher who's already a starting-level player, and he's only going to be getting better, especially because he has star development. All you have to give up is either a group of day 3 picks or Matthew Adams, who is a fringe rosterable player. Another talented young pass rusher who's kind of easy to get is James Houston with the Detroit Lions. Not a lot of people know the name James Houston, but he's a really talented young player. He had 8 sacks last year and a little over 130 snaps, which is a ridiculous rate. He has star development, so again, there's plenty of room for him to grow, and he's the 4th highest rated player at his position for the Lions. So because of that, he's gonna be kind of easy to get, and with him having star development, there's a lot of room for you to grow him. The price to get Houston was not too much. Only Zaire Franklin, who's a low-level starting linebacker, and that's enough to get you a 24-year-old star development talented pass rusher. Another good edge rushing option would be looking at the Ravens with David Ojabo and Odafe Oweh. I think Oweh is a little bit easier to get, so he's going to be the choice here. Oweh is another freak athlete. He has ridiculous speed and quickness off the edge. However, in comparison to James Houston, he's 4 inches taller, and he's around 35 pounds heavier. All you got to give up is Ezra Cleveland, an offensive lineman on the last year of his contract, and you'll get a really good young player with Odafe Oweh. Moving inside now, I think Devin White with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is a good choice. The Buccaneers have Levante David ahead of him on the depth chart, and while the Bucs do run a 3-4 defense, which means they have 2 inside linebackers on the field at pretty much all times, I feel like the game kind of views Devin White's trade value as him being a second string, even when that's clearly not true. White has impressive athleticism, and if you like to use your middle linebacker, Devin White is probably the perfect guy. In order to trade for him, you don't have to give up too much. Really just Marcus Davenport and a 4th-round pick. That's all it takes to get Devin White. Moving into the secondary now, I tried to find some good young defensive backs to look at, and I think Asante Samuel Jr. with the Chargers is a good choice. There's quite a few good young corners who are easier to get than they should be, but we'll go with Asante Samuel Jr. here. He's only 23 years old, he has star development, and he's already an 82 overall. He's one of the more underrated young players in the league. All we have to do is give up KJ Osborne and then swap a 2nd for a 4th. So we are giving up some assets of value, but I think it's definitely worth it for Asante Samuel Jr. There are some other good options at cornerback, though. Let's compare his value to Greg Newsome and J.C. Horn, both of whom are also 23 years old. field. They also have star development, and they're both one rating higher than Asante Samuel. And as you can see here, it's really not that hard to get either of them. I think if you look at the value compared to Asante Samuel, it is a little easier to get Asante, but all three of them are easier to get than they should be. Let's look at safety now. We've got Derek Forrest with the Washington Commanders. They drafted Jartavis Martin in the second round, which makes Forrest a little bit easier to trade for. He does not have a development trait. He only has normal, but he's only 24, and he's only an 82 overall. He's an above-average starter at the position, and while his normal development will limit how much he'll get better, at the bare minimum, he's going to be a mid-80s safety for you for a while. All we had to really do was trade Mo Alley Cox and a couple mid-round picks to get the job done. Brian Branch with the Lions will be the last player we look at. Detroit has a lot of talented safeties. We have Kirby Joseph, Tracy Walker, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, which I think makes Branch a little bit more expendable in the eyes of the game, even though that's really bad logic because the Lions just used a second-round pick on Brian Branch, and he can play a variety of different roles on your defense, whether that's at either safety spot, in the box at linebacker, or where I think he'll be best suited in the nickel as your slot corner. Now, we are going to have to give up some value here, but I actually really think it's worth it. You're going to give up a second-round pick next year, which that's a nice pick, but I think it will be worth it, especially if you think the team you're building is good. Andrew Booth Jr. is also in the deal. He's a talented young corner, only 22 years old, but Booth only has normal development, and he has low injury ratings. I think Branch is going to be a significantly more valuable long-term asset because he's younger, he has the development trait, and he's not as injury-prone. So those are 15 players who you should trade for in your Madden franchise modes. Let me know what you thought down below, and if there are other really good players who you like to trade for, feel free to let me know as well down below in the comments. That'll wrap up the episode. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more. Peace out.